Hey everyone, let's talk about PBR. So PBR is, if I'm being honest, is a overly thrown word that people use over and over again and just throw it out carelessly, which kind of freaks out some of the newcomers and some of the people who are not familiar with PBR, which is not a good thing. PBR is not a big deal at all. If anyone tells you like, do you know how to do PBR? Yes. If you can texture properly, yes, you can make a PBR easily. So PBR basically stands for a new and improved method of rendering calculations. Not more than that. It still utilizes some of the things that we used to know before and still does. There have been few minor changes and tweaks. Nothing big that will make you learn the whole production pipeline of texturing from scratch again. So I'm gonna link you guys to two articles. One is in Marmoset, one is in Substance Painter website. I would recommend you guys to read the Marmoset first. If you don't want to read Substance, it's fine. Just make sure to read the Marmoset one. So PBR, according to Marmoset website, is physically based rendering, refers to the concept of using realistic shading, lighting models along with measured surface values to accurately represent real world materials. So as I mentioned, PBR is just an advanced and better way of rendering engines to calculate light, material and shaders. So the lighting model is something that we don't deal with. Shading occasionally, and measured surfaces are not gonna be a lie. Let's say you're measuring a surface which is a rock. That value of rock in PBR will be the same in every rock that everyone's gonna do, because those are the values extracted from real life objects for PBR. PBR does have its few rules. So the main one is energy conservation. So it basically says that an object cannot reflect more light than it receives. So it basically says if this object is hit by a light, it will never reflect back the same or more amount of the light that it has received. Practically, the effect it does is the more rough the surface is, the less light it reflects back. So we have a broader highlight, and the more less rough the surface is, it's going to reflect more light and we will have tight highlights. One more thing that we do in PBR is we don't include AO in our albedo or diffuse map. AO will be plugged in separately in an engine. So everything you guys want to know about PBR is actually right there. Don't get frightened when everyone asks you like, do you know PBR? Do you know how to do this? It honestly is not a big deal. Just a read of it can give you guys enough to deal with any questions you guys might have. But apart from that, why do we started using PBR? Like what's the reason it became so well used in games as it is right now? So the reason being, it's pretty cheap on memory. Especially using the metal roughness workflow is a lot cheaper than specular and gloss. Do keep in mind, specular and gloss is also a PBR thing. It doesn't make, if you're using specular and gloss, does not mean you're not making it PBR. So metal roughness are a lot cheaper maps, because metal map is basically a black and white map which define which is metal, which is not. Roughness is basically an inverse of gloss, so that's going to be fine. So what metal map and gloss map with your albedo map does is, so if you guys, I don't know if you guys know about this or not, but a metal does not have a base color of its own. The color that a metal has is the light it reflects back. So right now we see, okay, so we have a bronze, so it's reflecting back a bit yellowish and golden reflection, because that's what it's not absorbing and just throwing it out. By that I mean, let's say light hits, light has all the waves of the color and most of the color get absorbed in this metal surface. The only thing that does not get reflected back, and that's the color you see. A metal by itself is not going to have its own diffuse. So when we make metal for a shader using a specular and diffuse workflow, what you do, you make your diffuse black, your roughness or glossiness will control how shiny or not shiny it is, and your specular will control the color you will see from your object. How metal and roughness has changed it is, let's ignore roughness for now, it's basically is microsurface. Metal and albedo combined in your PBR workflow acts in such a way that, so we have our diffuse, it's going to take our diffuse map, it's going to take our metal map. So everywhere it's white in our metal map, it's going to make the diffuse black, and it's going to pick in the color from our diffuse map and use that as a specular. To showcase, let's go in and go for our metal map. So you see most of the things are white, right? So it's metal. So what it's doing, it's making our diffuse black before rendering it out, and it's picking the color from our albedo and using that as a specular color. So to show you guys a more prominent example, let me just go here, add a fill. Let's not do that. Let's go to our main layer. I'm gonna paste it again, and I'm gonna make this one, let's add a black mask. I'm gonna paint out just a bit of it. So we painted out the same thing, right? We still have the yellowish reflection back. But let's say I go to the fill layer and make it roughness, make the metallic, I make it black. You see our reflection has been changed to white instead of golden yellow color. It's reflecting back white. It's reflecting back golden yellowish. So right here, we don't have any metal. Right here, we have metal. So if I go to my metal map, everywhere it's white, it's picking our diffuse as a speck and making our diffuse black. Everywhere it's black, meaning it's non-metal or insulator, it's using our diffuse as a diffuse, and it's combining that with our roughness to figure out how rough or smooth that surface is. So that's something about metal and roughness workflow and how it works. Just try to keep it simple, nothing complex. That's all you have to know. But make sure to go through the article to know every nuts and bolt about it. Another reason that PBR has been so much integrated in the pipeline is it makes your material constant throughout every project or every level that you have or every light. So what PBR will do is, if your material are set up correctly, so every of these, albedo, your metal, your roughness, are supposed to have a value which comes under a small scale. So if you look at the diffuse in metal roughness workflow, you will notice the albedo is a lot lighter than a specular roughness one. So how does it make it constant? So let's say you made a gold or a steel for a game, and you use the real life PBR values for it, which you can find online. Many sources have that. And you throw that gold or armor to a different levels. Let's say one level is lava, one level is snow, another level is just a building or something. The material is gonna look like a gold or a armor in all three of those lighting situations. So it stabilizes your look in every lighting thing. So this bronze, with every light that I bring in, is still gonna look like bronze. It's not gonna change what it is. Apart from that, being the fact that we are using universal values for those materials, every material that different artists creates are gonna look the same. So there's no place for human error that this artist made a bit of different material, this artist made a bit of different material. So bringing me back to the fact that, as I mentioned, PBR has some values that you have to stay under. You cannot go pure white, you cannot go pure black, you cannot go complete rough, you cannot go completely non-rough. So these are some of the rules, and you have to work under the limit. So do I myself knows the limit or values? Sometimes I do, sometimes I tend to forget. I don't want to be like every time I create a fill layer, I go in, I pick a color and I check my reference board or something just to make sure it's right or not. It becomes a bit annoying while you're texturing it. So we're going to do what cool kids do. So let me open up one of the character I did. So this is the character I did a very long time ago, and this is the character we are going to use for this week's lectures. But back at that time, I was a bit too lazy to focus on right PBR values, which kinda gave me an issue while I was lighting in Marmoset. My lights were not working fine with my materials. Obviously, because I never cared too much about PBR. But as we discussed, PBR has some of its specific value which you have to follow. But every time looking for it, checking for it becomes a bothering thing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Substance Share. So Substance Share has a huge library of substance asset, materials, meshes, and every other thing. You can download it. All you have to do to install it is drag it in Substance Painter and just go through the process and it's done. For now, we're going to pick in PBR Validate by Wes McDermott. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. You have to drag this and drop to Substance Painter and you will be installed. So if I minimize this and go back to Substance Painter, let's say I drag and drop this guy here and enable it, it's going to turn it into a green to red range. So green being fine, red being bad, orange being kinda tolerable, but reds are a no-go. So right now what it's showing me, let's see what this file or filter does. Let's create a metal rough validate, and validation mode right now it's in albedo and it's using a 30 sRGB threshold. You can make it 50 as well, which kind of messes up more. So 30 for personal projects seems to work fine. 50 versus 30, that's something you have to decide for the project or a game you're working on. And if I go to validate mode and if I make it metal, it's going to show me which are the metallic map that are wrong. So right now what I have is these are metal, but my base color for these guys, let me hide this so I can see my base color. So my base color for that metal is pretty dark, and that something is really wrong. It's not gonna look right. It looks fine in this one. It looked fine in Marmoset when I sheeted my light and stuff, but it's not gonna look the same amount of good and in different lighting situation. So this filter is an easy thing that makes our life so much easier. So let's say I want to fix this, right? Let me just browse through the metal piece. So if I go to the layer that's describing the base color for that pieces, this one, and I make it lighter, it's gonna go greenish. So to fix those things, I just went to the main layers and changed the color to a bit brighter tone, and my metal seems to be fixed. If I go to combine, it's going to show me both metal and albedo, and I can go in to those fill layers and make my albedo a bit brighter to have everything green, which basically gave me a model that is going to look good in every different lighting situation. So this is a pretty cool tool I like to use over and over again when finishing the texture of my character. Just because we have this tool doesn't mean you can go in and put any values that you want. Be considerate about those values, a rough estimate of those values. Don't over exceed it or under exceed it, like make it pure white or pure black. Keep that in mind, but run a metal rough validate before finalizing it so you can make sure everything in your project is going to work fine.